Hi, I'm Jeremy, and welcome to our podcast. This is a podcast of news from the real world. Like I said, my name is Jeremy. I am a technical director, second year grad.
My name is John. I'm a lighting designer.
My name's Allie. I'm a second year SMPM.
Hi, I'm Kelly. I'm a third year TD, filling in for Josh.
And Allie, you want to start it off today?
Yeah, so today we're starting off with an article from Entertainment Central, Pittsburgh, and it's talking about the International Festival of Firsts, that is happening in Pittsburgh now, over the course of the next 8 weeks, actually. It's longer than the ones in the past. Happens every 4 years, and apparently the big rubber duck that was here a couple years ago was a remnant of the 2013 one. Yeah. So,
Rubber ducky.
right. So in this one, the writer Rick Handler, title of it is The Cultural Trust presents some of the best in international and local talent, and Pittsburgh shines. And Mr. Handler talks about the different events that are happening and that are available to the public. Some of them are ticket-based, but it's free ticket. You just have to have a ticket to go in so they can monitor how many people are in there. Some of them you have to pay for, but they're not too expensive, and they're all pretty darn cool. Definitely bringing in international talent, but also focusing on shining light on Pittsburgh locals and artists.
It's cool.
Yeah.
I did see a lot of people that I know in the area that went out to go see this, and a lot of things that are going on with it. There are a lot of projection mapped surfaces and light tunnels and things. So there's a lot of really cool videos going around about this. Even now since it's ongoing too, I think we're going to continue to see cool, new, innovative things coming from this throughout the next month or so.
For sure. They do the Beyond one. Oh wait, no, that's a different one. But the Manifold one was the one I was thinking about. That's the one where they wrap it around the front of the Benedum. And it's like all media projection. Oh, it looks so cool. It already happened, unfortunately. And it was only once. But
I think that is cool that this art goes away. It is only for those that are there to experience it at the time.
Yeah, because it feels less like a festival that way and more kind of like a art installation or an art experience. Like I was going to compare it to Three Rivers Arts Festival, but this seems far more engaging, I suppose, just because it's so fleeting.
Yeah.
And it's and I like that they're all sorts of things. Like it's everything from like traditional theater to like media mapping to there's one that I really want to go see. It's considered traditional theater, and it's called Blind Cinema, and it's the one where you go into a movie theater and there's a row of kids sitting behind you, and you put on a blindfold, and they have to describe what they're seeing, and like they're trying to describe it.
So you're seeing it. You're essentially seeing it through a kid's child's eyes.
Isn't it cool though?
Yeah.
Different perspectives. Gotta love it.
That's cool. that is an interesting way to do it.
But there's like a whole bunch of stuff. There's like the tunnel of light and sound. That's titled Beyond, and that one's actually up for quite a bit.
That's good. So some of these are staying around for a while.
Yeah. Which is awesome. But yeah, cool things to do in Pittsburgh.
Right?
For the next 8 weeks.
Well, and then also moving back to Broadway, New York, 3 musicals closed this past, in the past week. And the first one that this article that Forbes posted talked about was SpongeBob the Musical. Which it's SpongeBob the Musical. I mean, I don't know how much
there was a lot of hype about it.
A lot of people were excited about it because it's SpongeBob and everyone grew up with it.
And you saw all the costumes and the proscenium and everything.
All these concepts for it.
I don't know how it did.
It didn't do well enough to stay open.
From what their rates that they listed in there, it looked like they weren't. They were breaking even at least, but the profit margins weren't what they wanted to be sustainable.
And they also had booked into a theater that was going to be kicking them out due to renovations, and I think that caused more and more of like, well, let's just end it here and be done with it.
Yeah.
I also think it's plagued by the issue that a lot of shows seem to be created from either movies or television now. So you're only capturing that generation or that group that grew up with it that are like, oh yeah, I remember going home watching SpongeBob every day after school. Wasn't one of those, but you know, I'm not a SpongeBob.
But I can still seeing the whole theme song.
Yeah, see, it's
ingrained in my
I
mind.
think a lot of it is playing off of that feeling,
The nostalgia of
and
it.
that nostalgic
Yeah.
feeling.
So maybe it doesn't have a lot of rewatchability
Yeah.
to it.
And I wonder how much it disappointed. I didn't go see it. I don't know many who did, but
Apparently it was really good.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah?
people who went to see it said it was like really well
because
done.
that's what you worry about is, does it really live up to your memory of the TV show, of coming home and
Exactly.
watching it?
Exactly.
You know, something can be really good, but it might still not live up to memory of.
Yeah.
Well, what about
Yeah.
this thing they did? Or if they chose to do that and not these.
I also
you
think
know.
it's such a contrast between, and you know, I think this is a challenge when people go from having an animated movie or animated show, trying to turn it into live action, is there's two ways you can do it. You can try to reproduce in every detail what it was, or you can do what Lion King did and take the creative design aspects so far beyond to something new that yes, it's the same story, same characters, but it's been elevated by all the new costumes, all the directing, and all of the set, that it's a new show.
Well, it's also, you can think about like the saturation of it. Because when Lion King came out after the movie, they just had the movie at the time. SpongeBob's come out after, over 10 years of having TV shows constantly on and new episodes.
I mean, it's still a running show,
Yeah.
which is bizarre.
Yeah. And then like the other two shows,
They talk about Carousel in this. And a big-
Carousel and
Thank goodness.
And well, big thing with Carousel was its connection kind of with the Me Too movement and how it talked about the abusive relationships and them trying to resolve it in it, but then it really just kind of made it worse.
Yeah. Well, and I thought it was interesting that with that and with getting the band back together, the writer, who wrote this? I forget.
This was Forbes, and the writer is Lee Seymour.
Mr. Seymour. And now I just have Little Shop stuck in my head. No, I thought it was interesting that he mentioned in both of those that it was like, yeah, maybe you would have done a little bit better if you had been a little bit more careful about what you edited out.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think that's something that we have to be careful of when we go to edit these original works that were done in a time and a place where either that was the norm or that was what was happening, and it is speaking to that issue being a bad thing. Because sometimes editing out isn't always the best choice.
Right. But just handling in a better way.
Yeah.
But it's also, part of it's with the buzz that these created, right? Each one had this buzz behind them that sold them initially some decent tickets, but kind of failed them in the long run. It's maybe trying to figure out how you get past the buzz of social media. Is this going to be long-standing, and how you can explore what will be substantial over more than just a short run that has to close.
Yeah.
I thought it was actually kind of sad that they said that for SpongeBob, they were really only focused on getting that buzz so that they could tour it. Like, they never wanted it to have a long run. I was like, oh, that's kind of icky, but I get it.
You'll be able to reach more audiences because the type, again, that generation that grew up with it isn't necessarily of, at this time in their lives, not of that financial status to go to a trip to New York to go see a show.
Right.
But if it comes to their hometown, they're going to see it. They're going to make more money on the road with that type of show than they will ever sitting in one house, I think.
It makes more business sense, but like for the performers who like got into that gig
Right.
in New York, has got to be like,
And
oh.
granted, they might end up on the tour of it, depends what level.
True.
And, yeah.
That's true.
But then, talking about ticket sales, Ticketmaster is accused of colluding with scalpers. This is in Variety by Jen Asward. And they're using a software program called Trade Desk, which is intended for large booking agencies to make large purchases for groups or reservations for events and things like that. And Ticketmaster is aware of it, and they have helped this program and essentially created this program for this purpose, and get a cut. Exactly, they get a cut percentage of these tickets that are being sold on this. And what people are doing is, as individual scalpers, they're using this program to get around and circumvent Ticketmaster's ways they try to prevent this from happening, large ticket orders being purchased by one person, in order to get those a large amount of tickets. And this isn't just trivial. This is being done to like the tune of $5 million for one event, of amount of tickets being purchased and profit being made secondhand. And they're working so quickly that it takes the chances away from everyone else to purchase the tickets fair and square. And I feel like this is going to I think it's at the point where it's boiling and it's starting to come up, but either like government's going to step in and something's going to happen with this, because I don't think Ticketmaster is really projecting wow, that really is a problem. You caught us. We need to fix that.
Yeah.
I think they're more like, yeah, that's been happening.
We're showing this to show the problems of scalping.
Right? Yeah.
It's our plan all along.
Right? Yeah. Because like they've made no admission of wanting to fix this loophole or do something to fix this loophole, because they think that this way that they have it set up for those large agencies to purchase tickets is the only way. And it seems really disheartening to see someone not want to try to fix it, I think.
Yeah.
But
there was in Buffalo a couple of years ago, there was Paul McCartney came to Buffalo for the first time. And like, it's Buffalo, we take our wins when we can get it, right? But the problem was no one could get a ticket, because the minute it went public, it like you couldn't even get on the site. And then they bought them up, and you looked at the prices of the tickets themselves from the arena. And you look at the prices that are, that they were reselling an hour later online. And it was just ridiculous, like hundreds of dollars of difference.
Yeah.
And you're like, where is that going?
Yeah,
Where
that's going to someone's pocket.
Right, exactly.
Like that's straight to someone's pocket. Not even the people that are selling the tickets are getting. Like originally, Paul McCartney's tour is not getting any of that money.
Right.
The event facility is not getting any of that extra money.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Well, it's also disheartening for the people who are trying to learn, like young kids trying to get into and view some of these things, and they see these ticket prices, and then you don't realize that it's actually supposed to be cheaper than that, and that they can actually try to view some of these concerts and other things like it, but it's being prevented by someone who's, scalping it.
We always talk about trying to make arts affordable, and this is one of those things that is being a heavy detriment on top of because concert tickets and pricing is usually, it's a little expensive, but it's not the egregious amount that it is after the Scalpers go home.
Right. Correct.
And it's sad.
It is. It really is. And like you said, especially because the artists involved are not the ones who are making it unaffordable and inaccessible, Yeah.
Well, as a
Slight tempo change.
ray of sunlight, this next article is titled "Ancient Paint Factory Unearthed," and it's sourced from BBC News. So these group of archaeologists, they found a paint factory, or what resembles a paint factory, in these caves. It's Lombos Cave in South Africa. So the reason why they're categorizing this as a factory as opposed to just an interesting find is because there are very discrete patches of this was the yellow
This was
paint,
manufactured.
this was the red paint, this was the blue paint, and then also, they found these kits that were like grab and go kits.
Oh.
That were like pre-made, and then they were put down and then left for ages and ages, and then we found them, which is awesome.
Well, I also think this is really cool because last week we had that article about the new blue, the new pigment being discovered, and the fact that we're still referencing and learning things that were done before. So it's discovery on both the history of things and the newness. Like it's still happening.
Well, and the fact that we can still find things like this and they haven't been completely erased because there's a lot of people out there who continually look and try to once again gain profit from it, and that we found such a great treasure trove of information that's available in this area of paint. Which is fascinating because color has always been a really big impact throughout society.
It's always been a guess
Right.
kind of thing. This reminds me, I spent a weekend in Barcelona, and I was fortunate enough to go into one of the churches that has the ancient ruins underneath it. Roman? Sure.
Stick with it.
So what this church did is the entire basement is this elevated glass platform. That's a walkway. So you're like 10 inches above the actual ruins, and you can look down through it and like.
That's awesome.
And there are dye baths that you can see that are still colored.
Wow.
Because the indigo has just been
permeated.
used so many times. So they were explaining this on the audio tour. So like you would see one that was like very indigo, and then you'd see the one next to it and it was slightly less blue, and they're like they would take dyed fabric from
And
this
wash it
bath
out.
into this bath, and then like it was
That's
just
awesome.
So I think this is kind of maybe looking at the same thing. I'm interested to see if we can get a little bit more information on it once the archaeologists know more about it.
Once they've had time to process and dig into the
It's also great because it's in South Africa where not as much is known as the Romans. Like you know quite a bit about the Romans, or the in the Europe area on how they had their civilization. But now we have a whole new, hopefully information that can come forward.
from a region that we aren't usually finding these things in.
Or at least we don't hear a lot about
Right,
it.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
we
not-
don't
not-
get that.
Not large enough of a discovery to be projected worldwide as much so.
And it's interesting because it plays into ancient trade routes, like was someone sending boats down there already to deposit these different pigments?
Yeah. Or were they sourcing them from this area too at
Exactly.
that time? Was a part of the culture then.
And I thought it was interesting that they even mentioned that like this changes how we thought like modern thinking and like processes were used and like when like what was it like 35,000 years, and now we're like actually 100,000.
Yeah, like a little further back.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Well, because you think about all of like why am I not gonna remember the name? This is horrible. My history teacher would fail me. Like the ruins, like the stones in France that are just standing straight up, and they're like, where did these come from? And like
where, what, why?
and how, and like this is very clearly like man-made. How far did they bring them? With what tool? Like there's gotta be so much that we don't know about how we thought and did stuff back then.
So here's a quote from one of the co-researcher, Francisco de Rico, from the University of Bordeaux. They, or someone, say that the mere fact that paints are being manufactured in a systematic way is indicative of a level of advanced thinking. It would have required a high degree of planning to bring together all of the elements of the kits, and if art really was the purpose, it suggests the cave dwellers of Blombos were capable of symbolic thought, the ability to let one thing represent another in the mind.
Yeah, that's so that's so impactful and so meaningful when we especially consider like the history of art. You know,
Right. It's got depth to it.
Yeah.
Speaking of art and the planet, art on a damaged planet, the theater in the age of climate change convening. This is on howlround.com, and this article talks about a series of groups and meetings and conversations that are happening every year. I think this is the 4th year in a row, and the 8th installment of Theater in the Age of Climate Change. and their main focus is how to increase sustainability, equality, and collaboration, and keep in mind the environment and what our impact on the world is. Which, there's so much work being done on impact or climate change and but the green materials, but we're not always paying attention and paying mind to how those things are coming about and being holistically green. And I think like this article, it's similar to another article last week that we didn't talk about. But it's talking about the same event. And but I think this one did a little more in depth. And like it's just one of those things that we talk about a lot and we want to do a lot about, but there's no clear path. And that's the one thing they said is like they had hoped to at this point had seen change from what they've been doing, but there's a feeling I think of spinning your wheels a bit to try hard to get grip on.
I think that there's this perceived culture around art that, like, even for theater makers, that we're like, oh, we're doing good, we're not supplying any industry, like, down with the coal industry, we don't use that for our theaters or whatever. Like, we feel like the art we produce is, like, not promoting the death of the planet, but then you look at how much we throw away.
Yeah.
So I think there's just such a distance between, like, artists thinking, yeah, look at me go, I'm gonna do this huge installation with plastic bottles, and then when the installation is done, are you just gonna keep those?
Is it a permanent installation?
Are you going to recycle them now, or did you alter them so much that they can't be recycled anymore?
Or in your process of making that sculpture, did you do things to them that released the chemicals or polluted the environment?
Exactly. Yeah.
Or did you burn them or char anything? Yeah.
This actually reminds me of Colluding,
Right?
where we did the projects that focused on like environmental impact and stuff, but it was difficult to think what you could do that focused on a non-human performer that didn't negatively affect the environment. It was that was difficult, right? And like and a lot of them included stuff where pieces were introduced into nature and like put up in nature, but like the tree wrapped in garbage, what happens to it afterwards?
Yeah.
Where does that garbage go afterwards? How did you get there? Did you use gas
Like,
in a car? Like
great, you collected the garbage. It's what do you do afterwards? That also has to be considered. And one thing that they did talk about is that in the groups that they were working with, they created and their goal was to create an app designed to promote the use of eco-friendly and reusable materials in theater design. And something with like that, I'm like, that's a great resource, but it's only as effective as the people using it. And if your people aren't using it properly or aren't finding what they need in there, they're going to default to what they know, which is also not always the best.
But you get that 5 minutes where you're like, yeah, this platform is made out of green materials. Good job, everyone. But then you've altered the material so you can never reuse it again.
There's something about in our industry we're either skewing towards dependability or goes away once we're done with it. And if we're a lot of the things that go away once we're done with it can't match some of those dependability needs, then we just say, okay, well, we'll go back to what we know, which is, again, not the greatest. But
but a lot of times we just don't have the time. I mean, with what we do, we're so rushed.
Time to process, or
the whole world is in that mode, though. We never have enough time to do anything. Everyone has to be doing everything at such a fast rate that we can't actually accomplish And so then we go back, we lean on what we know works, and will get us through in each sort of crunch time,
Right.
which might not always be the best. It's introducing it in a way that makes it easier.
Well, this is taking a turn.
As we
Yours,
plummet.
are all yours taking a turn, I feel like, or?
Oh, it was good.
The other one was nice. It was
Ebb and flow.
It's not good. This is from USA Today, and the title is 8 Insiders Share Their Stories 1 Year Later. And it is talking about survivors of sexual misconduct in the film and TV industry. So this process of interviewing and surveying is part of USA Today. It's called their 94% project. It began in December 17, and they've partnered with the Creative Coalition, Women in Film and Television, and the National Sexual Violence Resource Center. And they said out of the 843 who responded, 94% said they have experienced some form of sexual harassment or assault during their careers in Hollywood. And
It's just unacceptable.
and
That
yeah,
percentage.
and
Oh my
like
God.
these stories that they've included, they're all 3-4 sentences, but it's like those 3-4 sentences you just know what else happened with that.
And this article had the videos with it
It had
too.
the audio.
The whole interviews. That
Yeah,
taking the time and watching those.
they were horrible.
Yeah, the quotes that they pull out capsulize it, but
I mean, those are bad enough.
yeah,
right,
it
right.
encapsulates
Yeah.
the intense points of it. But it's so deep in the like what is actually being said too, and to hear it come from their own voices too, makes it not just black and white text on a page or on the screen or with a pretty picture. You know, it's makes you empathize with it so much more, and motivates you to try to do what you can to change.
And one of the things that I noticed was common among all of them was the fact that the people who were sharing their stories were very upfront about the fact that this was not a therapeutic thing for them at all.
No.
It was very uncomfortable, and this was so that the stories would be out there, and so other people could see it and hear it and be more aware of how not okay this is. 94%. Oh my gosh.
Right. And I think yes, it's a shame that they happened when they did, but I think we're starting to make a move as an industry and hopefully as a country to where not tolerating this and people understanding that that's not okay in the moment becomes, is becoming more noticeable and more apparent, and it's taking other people, not necessarily the person that it's happening to, but the people that are around when it's happening or being aware of it, to step in and stop it as well.
Well, but even the people that it's happening to, like, I listened to Morgana's and Miriam's in particular, and they both noted how it was like a deer in the headlights. Like, they didn't know what to do. They didn't know what was happening. They didn't know that it was the thing that they thought it was. You know what I mean? And so just to be like, no, this is not okay. None of these things are okay. Like, to have a defined.
But here's the thing. I was talking with someone about, sensitivity and, all things that can cause people to feel offended. And, what to do if this happens, or what to do if you're the one causing the offense, or if you're the one that has been offended. And it's like, here's the handbook to it.
Yeah.
It's not, there isn't one. And the instant you create one, all of a sudden it's not applicable anymore because culture has moved on, society has changed, and there's no anchoring it.
And there's no way to nicely stop this behavior.
Yeah.
Even if
Right.
you are an observer, to be the most effective and stop it in the moment, you need to jump into that conversation and say, stop.
Yeah.
That is not how you talk to her.
Yeah.
Which is a very aggressive move, which I think most people are very hesitant to do.
Yeah.
Because how is then the harasser going to react?
Correct. And then also you run the risk of, this is where it gets really slippery, because there are some people that if you were to jump in and say, no, that's not how you talk to them, the other person can say, no, excuse me, let me fight my own battles, I pick and choose. Like, yes, you can, I think that comes to the point of, there's no one cure-all answer for this.
Right. But like the article last week, I think it's more of like a
Consciousness
and a culture thing.
Mhm.
Like if you create the culture in that company or in that film shoot or in that writing office, like anything, if you create the culture where if anything happens, you can report it. I don't care if it's, camera op number 2 or the
Having
CEO.
blind reporting.
Right, like create that culture of openness and create that culture of non-tolerance, and I think that is
Go a long way.
Yeah.
What's also, you want to make sure you have good friends within wherever you're working in the industry, because if you have good friends, friends will still step in and they know that you have someone with your back.
Yeah.
Well, that's why you have to make sure you have people that you really do
Unless
trust. And
they're
then,
also concerned that they'll lose their jobs.
yeah.
I think it's important to have friends outside of what you're, outside of the
Reality
organization
check.
you're working in too, because then you can say, hey, so this happened this past week, and this is what happened, and their unrelated opinion of it, or contextualized as far as you see it, because you're telling it, then it can, they can be the ones that say, well, that was really bad, or well, this could have been perceived this way. They could have taken offense to it by this, from both sides.
Yeah.
Like I said this, and I don't know if that was really could that have been interpreted wrong? Like from my standpoint, I didn't interpret it that way, but trying to help by putting someone else in those shoes can help.
Right. I mean, I also think it's not that I think it's specifically a gendered thing, but historically and from the reports that we have seen, it is primarily a gendered thing. It shouldn't be part of their jobs. Like they are trying to do their jobs.
Mm-hmm.
She is a camera operator. She is a writer. Like they
Yeah.
are trying to just do their jobs, and the fact that they have to worry if someone is going to second guess the fact that when someone gave her a ride home and no one else was around.
Yeah.
Well, did he really do that? Well, I'm just trying to be a camera op.
Right. Right?
No, I gotcha. And I know that I am very strong-willed, to say the least, and stubborn, so I don't really try to let these things happen to me, but that's just because I'm okay with being blunt. And you can't say the same for all survivors of sexual misconduct or of any kind of workplace harassment, whether that's just verbal or if it's something more of they're not listening to you, if you're the manager, whatever. So I can sympathize with these women who don't have my ability to not care what someone thinks of you in the moment.
And I also think a big part of that is a lot of us have learned how to do that in our lives. Like in my undergrad and other places, it's people were mistreating others or mistreating me, and it took a while to then be able to stand up and be like, wait a minute, I'm a lot more blunt than I used to be when I was in high school.
Oh yeah.
I mean, a lot of us have grown and been able to do that, and I think it's something that's difficult for everyone to be able to grasp.
Yes.
Which is unfortunate that it comes to that direction.
Yeah.
Because it shouldn't have to.
Like today, out of concern, I told a friend, "You look terrible. Can I get you something? Do you need food or like tea or a hot beverage or anything?" But it's just like, you're looking rough. How can I help you not look this way anymore?
Yeah.
there's to go in a more positive light.
Back on the up.
The Interval did an article written by Shoshana Greenberg about the 7 women of theater history that you should know about, part 5. There are four other parts before this. Tune in next week.
2 more parts afterwards? I just gotta know, is this one part in each woman or one part of their lives?
What?
Well, like you said, there's part 5.
Part 5.
Oh, is this part
So
5?
So
I
the
thought it was
rest will
breaking
be
it
number
down.
7.
Okay.
What?
Never mind.
So so each part they look at one woman.
No.
That's what
each
I'm
part.
thinking.
Oh,
No,
I'm
That's what
sorry.
I. Okay, that was what. Thank you. That's
No,
what I
no,
was
So
thinking.
35 women in total.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
That's even better because it covers much more.
At the
it covers
current moment.
more. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. I was just like, so they're covering only one on each part?
No,
Okay,
I
listen,
got
you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Actually,
I did take some time and I went back and looked into some of the other parts, and there are actually some really impressive feats done.
Dude,
Even,
these
like,
women.
Yeah,
Oh my God. Okay, so sorry.
love it.
The article discusses the lives and accomplishments of these women and everything they accomplished, from like strides in like race and gender to like Broadway politics and contracts, and like one was the first woman cab driver in New York City. It was
Nice.
like, it was hilarious. The
That must have been a hard job, right?
they
Yeah.
introduced her. Oh my God, she was the best. Wait, hold up. It was one of my favorites because the way that they started that part.
So many of these of women
Well, I
when
find
they're
it.
when they're introducing themselves into a new field that hasn't been pervaded by women to that day,
Mm-hmm.
it's an uphill battle.
Yeah.
Anytime you're putting yourself into an industry, even if if men are when they're first introducing themselves into like being a secretary or being a nurse,
Yes.
there was
being a nanny.
being a nanny.
Oh, are you like
Yeah, are
sexual
you?
predator?
Yeah.
Like
I
that's
mean,
the only reason.
Are you wanting to get
would
close to my
ever-
kids? Why?
Right.
That's the
Yeah.
only reason you would ever be interested in working with children.
Right, obviously.
Yeah.
But so anytime I think there's someone moving into an atypical field for them, that personality, they're like the first person in there, has
They
to
gotta
be
rough
tough,
and tumble.
like because they are fighting so many stereotypes and will for almost their entire career, because it's not like culture moves fast. When it's considering your job and how long you're actually working in this industry or in a industry. So like the personality of that person has got to be pretty impressive to begin with.
And
Mhm.
even there are even some directors now, like, who are still, directing, female directors who are like, they're tough.
Mm-hmm.
They're not the most, not always, and I'm not
Yeah.
going to generalize, they're not always the most like pleasant to work with, but like they've gotten where they are. Like,
Because
they're
they're
tough.
tough.
Like, they're,
And
yeah.
luckily, I think we're at the point, especially in theater industry, where we're starting to see that change from you have to be tough to be in this business to being
Right.
accepting of everyone no matter what their background is.
Mhm.
And we are in that shift right now.
Yeah. I think technical direction is going to need
But like
far more time.
you say that, and in all of my education, not in school, but in working with in like professional theaters, all my technical directors were female,
Great.
and like
That's awesome.
and and when they left, they were replaced by female people, and like that was very fortunate for me
Mhm.
because I didn't experience the gruff tough man being up there being in charge all the time.
Yeah.
I experienced this woman that could kick somebody's butt real quick if they needed to. And I think the industry is trying to make that shift, and especially like nationally more so than locally as well.
So it's interesting that you brought up that she could kick someone's ass,
Mhm.
because as a female technical director, you kind of have to adopt the traits of a male technical
In order to
director
be-
in order to be respected.
Especially being at that leading edge of it, because
Yeah.
that is still fairly heavily dominated by men
Yeah.
industry. Same thing with like sound, still fairly heavily dominated by men. Props and costumes still heavily dominated by female.
Well, and even like in management, I think it's pretty female dominant, but like there's only 2 categories that you can be in.
Mhm.
Like, you can be like the really tough, like, get everything done, but like you're not going out for a drink with anybody afterwards, or you're like the mom.
Yeah.
And there's no in between. Like, you have to fit into one of those 2 categories. You're like, but what?
On tour, I'm known as tour mom at times. But did you find that?
I
one?
did. Oh my goodness. Gertrude Jeanette is believed to have been the Gertie first woman to drive a cab in New York City. But that's not her only claim to fame, in case you were wondering.
I assumed this is a theater.
No.
She was also one of the first women to get a motorcycle license in New York. But, more importantly, she was an actor and a playwright who founded theater companies in her Harlem neighborhood. Like, the fact that they led with those 2 things.
Right.
And then they were like, oh, hey,
Also theater.
she founded this. She also was on national television in the 50s as like one of the first black actors. You know, wrote about authentic black characters because she felt like they weren't represented, but like also was like cab.
The cab and the motorcycle.
Driver. These women are amazing. They go through them. So there's 7 of them, right?
And there are 7. And there'll be 7 on the next one. And there are 7 on the last one. I've got it now.
Yeah. So like real quick, like.
Question quick.
Alice Childress was the first professionally produced black female playwright in off-Broadway in like the 1950s. She also, like, a lot of her shows were banned because they were really, really progressive, both gender and racially. She also fought, this is pretty cool, she also fought for union off-Broadway contracts that would guarantee that actors get paid in advance. Nice. Like, what?
Yeah.
So yeah, Mary B. Pearl only did 2 plays, but they were some doozies. She was a playwright and educator in the early 20th century. First known African American to graduate from Emerson College. Her first play was about birth control. And this was in 1919.
Wow.
Right?
Oh.
So she wrote a play, a progressive monthly publication that advocated for women's reproductive rights, which must have been quite the thing in 1919. And her second one was a story of a soldier in South Carolina who came back to home from fighting overseas to find out that his father had been lynched. So, like, she did not tackle small topics. And she considered her plays to be deliberate acts of political protest, advocating racial positions on race and gender issues.
Yeah.
Well, all of these, I think,
They're
are
amazing.
clearly worth researching.
Definitely go through
Go
and-
back, because I could
yeah,
literally talk
yeah.
for the entire 15 minutes about these 7
Right.
women.
But yeah, definitely go online. And the source on that one was from
The Integral.
from the Integral, and go look at that.
Mhm.
The author is
Shoshana Greenberg.
Go look those up because those are incredible women that everyone should read
cool.
about. Their accomplishments are really, really good. And in our trend of confronting things and talking about the uncomfortable, there's an article from Fast Company by Stephanie Voza who says what to think about before being honest. I think this speaks to a lot of us because a lot of us tend to consider ourselves brutally honest. But the main points being, what does a person really want to know? What is the most important observation? What is my motivation in my opinion that I'm giving here? And what will happen
The
if
most
I don't
important
provide
observation
feedback?
was that he looked horrible.
Right?
And I was concerned for him.
Okay. So, and like these are all things that we should be to the point where we're subconsciously asking ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Is it necessary to give feedback in this position? Will something bad happen if I don't give this feedback? Will an offense go uncorrected if I don't say this? But or is my motivation? Well, if I say this, that makes them look bad or that makes them feel bad.
Yeah.
Is it being malicious? or is it being trying to help improve either the situation or the other people involved?
Yeah.
Are you trying to build someone up or trying to tear someone down?
Yeah. Because honesty can work both ways. Brutal honesty is just in the delivery of that. You can be honest without being mean,
Yes.
or spiteful. But so that's a good article. Definitely a good little read.
And I liked that one said that if you have a bunch of things to say, maybe pick out like one or two that are really important. And
focus on the most important at the moment.
Right, and then that makes it easier because if you're going with like a list of 20 things, to go down that list and be like, okay, what's my motivation for this one? What's my,
by the time,
one,
and also by the time you get to the end of that list,
it's
They
no longer
forgot.
listening.
They forgot
Right.
the first
Yeah.
one.
And also, having those one or two things can just open up that dialogue for things to grow in the future.
Right.
So, and it kind of ties into another article.
It's how to solve complex problems by not focusing on them. This was a source from
Kevin's
Fast
all about
Company.
this.
But
It's true though. It's basically like the shower effect or like the bathroom effect when you're in the shower, you're on the toilet, and then automatically all of a
About to
sudden
fall asleep.
you're just like, oh my goodness, that's how I
I
solved
helped
this.
out with my infographic resume last night for bumpers.
Like, wait!
So I had a pen and I was just like,
Just make sure it's
my
legible
note made
though.
sense this
Okay,
morning.
that's
so
Well,
That's
a
awesome.
lot of this really covers some really interesting facts about how our brain works and how our brain will start processing things when we're not thinking on it. And sometimes that extra stress is just making our brain block more and more. And sometimes we just need to take a step back, breathe, and do something else for a little bit.
well, see, this article, much like the 7 women made you really in depth and read into it. This article set me down many rabbit trails because the Koenig effect, which is what this article mainly talks about, is not to be confused with incubation or the incubation thought process, which this article confuses it a lot. Confuses the two, because the effect that is mentioned here is more about task relatedness and having you remember the tasks that you have yet to complete when you're interrupted from them. So if you're taken away from a known list of things, you remember what you have to do
Right.
better when you come back to it, because you've been thinking about what you have to do, not thinking on the problem necessarily, but thinking what you have to do. And this is actually named after the secretary who founded it, because she had realized that when she was interrupted with a task, she would go home and then come back the next day and instantly remember where she left off,
Yeah.
and then be able to proceed and attack those much
More
more
effectively.
effectively.
Efficiently.
I get that a lot with my to-do lists.
Mhm.
Like for Way Out West, I'll be like making a notes list or whatever. Then I'll come out and I'll do whatever. And right in the middle of the doing whatever, I'll be like, oh crap, I need to put carpet under the thrust. And I have a little notebook and write it down.
It's how we process, it's how we can achieve what we need to achieve. I have like little scraps of paper that I'll constantly be pulling and being like, and that's my new checkbox.
Yeah.
And that checkbox goes here because I totally almost forgot about you. But it's okay.
It's okay, checkbox.
But the other thing is making sure you write down when you do those, because if
Yeah,
you don't
yeah.
write down or if you don't do it then,
But,
you
like,
will forget again and then it won't come
For
back.
me, I don't tend to write down a lot,
Mhm.
but I also function very high in a field where I get interrupted a lot, which makes sense because now I am retaining all those. That's how I am effectively retaining them, is because I'm getting interrupted in all those tasks that I'm trying to do.
Gotcha. Well, this is completely different. So
Close it off for today.
to close it off. Also, something that is at the forefront of my mind, though, if we want to jump off of that, because we were just covering copyright in class. So this one is by Timothy B. Lee on Ars Technica. Talks about the Senate passing a copyright bill that will end the 140-year protection for old songs. So the Senate just passed the Music Modernization Act, which did 2 big things. It streamlined the process for getting licensing rights to, use copyrighted material, and it also proposed to change the copyright protection timeline and footprint. Because now there's if you go back,
So extensive.
oh my god, if you go back through the copyright history, it's like before this date, if it was published, then it's this many years plus this, and then if it's afterwards, and it's this, and it's an independent contractor, it's 95 years. It's like, oh my god.
It's standardized.
And then it gets even worse when you toss in Disney and all of their futzing that they've been doing with the copyright laws.
Mickey Mouse is going to be the reason.
The mouse controls everything.
Right. Disney is in, Carbonite somewhere, very happy. So that is what this article talks about. I mean, it's a bill, it's passed, we'll see, but like, it's interesting. I think the streamlining process is, to me, seems like a more important thing, because I don't know, I'm icky about copyright stuff, because it's like, are you taking money away from an artist and their heirs? Are you, like...
Well, that's the thing, I think with like 140 years, you have at least the person who created it, and at least their children, maybe their children's children.
Right.
And with the streamlining of it, I hope that it just makes it more to the fact of people are actually going to get that permission and pay those royalties more so than just, let's just not say that we've done it, use it, and as long as no one asks, we're okay.
Right.
As long as we try to stop doing that, I think we'll be better.
Because, I mean, like, getting the, which one is it? The mechanical is ASCAP BMI? Or that's the performing. But, like, getting the mechanical, like, is a different process, and so if they were just all the same, or at least, like, one process for each, and then you just follow it, and we have people who check up on it, and, artists get credit, but people can still use their work. Like, so, we'll see.
Right.
We'll see how that goes.
To be continued. But thank you for joining in for this week, News from the Real World podcast. And, yeah, that is it.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.